Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alyssa Globe, and I'm here, new year, new us, with Scott Hayward, my co-host. How's it going, Scott?
Happy New Year, Alyssa. Great to see you.
New Year.
How was your trip back from Ontario?
Well, I think the words that I said, they were jumbled, but people got the gist, I think.
Good enough.
Yeah. So I just got back from Ontario. We were there for about a month last night. We got in at about 10 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is midnight where we were used to in Ontario. And I had my 2-year-old and my 8-month-old, and it was pretty crazy, very exhausting. Got very little sleep. Woke up at 5:30 in the morning with the 2-year-old because she's not used to the time change. And don't really know what's going on right now, but I'm going to try and get through this podcast as best I can.
Now, your husband had to come home about a week earlier.
Yeah.
A week and a half, actually, earlier than you guys for work. So did he enjoy his 10-day vacation?
Well, I think at first he was like, oh, great, quiet and peace. But then he said it was sort of like how he was like before he was married, when he felt like his life had a lot less meaning. So I'm going to take that as a compliment. And I think he was excited that we came home until today when there were severe meltdowns and accidents. So I think he's kind of wishing he was back to last week.
It lasted all of 5 hours.
Yeah, exactly. How's your life? I don't even know what's going on with you, so tell us.
You never ask, so I'll just tell people. First off, thanks for delaying the recording of this podcast on this night by 5 minutes. I could watch the end of the Jets game. They went 4-2 on Buffalo. It was a crazy game, lots of sticks there. But we're now into the second half of the NHL season, and our teams are doing pretty good, Alyssa. The Toronto Maple Leafs are right there, top of the division. Winnipeg's right there, top of the division, top of the conference. And your husband's Calgary Flames, well, they're in a playoff spot right now. So.
I mean, nothing is as bad as the game we went to in Montreal over Christmas.
Did you guys leave like 8 minutes left or something like that?
It was a very close game, but it was so terrible, and we didn't want to wait too long to get out of there that we did leave. But it was almost as bad as watching an OHL game back when I used to cheer for the Sarnia Sting. Just really messy play and goalless for a really long time. I'm racking my brain as to who they played. You might remember, but was it
Anaheim?
No, it's like the lowest team. They have like half the points as the second lowest team.
So it'd be like Chicago, Anaheim, or something like that. They'd be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes.
Yeah.
So that's why you saw that. Really
bad. Really, really bad. But it's a really cool arena. It's very historical. The pregame is cool. So it was good.
Yeah, largest arena in the NHL, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and I like the fans in Montreal. Like, no matter what happens, no matter how bad they're doing, they're pretty. Like, Toronto fans get ugly, but Montreal fans, they're still cheering.
Do you remember the riots in Vancouver?
Yes. I remember the girl who stole pants. That's all that I really remember. Do you remember when they were breaking through all the storefronts and this, 20-year-old girl stole pants, and it was caught on all the videos and she had to go to trial, and it was nationally watched by all. You don't remember this?
It's like the chick who threw the chair from the balcony on the Gardner. Yeah. These are, what do they call them? Canadian Heritage Minutes.
They should be besties.
Maybe they are. Anyway, yeah, so besides that, the only other really update in my life is my wife is Ukrainian Greek Catholic, and so her parish is on the Julian calendar, so they celebrate Christmas Eve on January 6th. So when we came back from Brandon, we got to work right away, and we made all 12 dishes, and we just finished the leftovers. So now it's time to hit the rowing machine and go do a bunch of walks and work that off.
Yeah. Dave, can you like Photoshop us for this podcast? Because I need my face slimmed down about a few inches.
Let's do a comparison between now and May.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it. Challenge. Yeah. Well, what is it always on January 6th or is it just
Yep.
how it felt? Okay. So
Yeah.
last year. So did they celebrate with the Trump riots at a few, was it last year or the year before? Wasn't that on January 6th?
Yeah, it was. It was on Christmas Eve, so that's how they
Was Oriana part of
celebrated.
that?
No comment. We have to wait for the committee report.
Yeah, which is ongoing.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you had 2 Christmases, and yeah, let's get back
This
to.
is the last year that we'll have 2 Christmases, which is kind of sad because next year, if we're in Brandon, her parish will be on the Gregorian calendar. So now we're just to 1 Christmas, only 1 set of presents.
The world's tiniest violin right here. All right, well, let's get into it. So New Year, we have a lot going on in Canada, despite the fact that, the news cycle is pretty slow. But our first topic is about something that actually happened on Twitter. And Scott and I are part of a little group chat full of staffers, former staffers, and politicos, a small number, and we are regularly conversing. And so somebody posted this, and it caught my attention, especially because this person is from Alberta. And Scott and I, we talked about it briefly, but I just want to go over the tweets thoroughly so that our viewers and listeners can know what's going on and then maybe have a little bit of a discussion. But the whole situation is very, very tragic. But I'll just go through reading some of these tweets. So this person who goes by Lois said, "Hello, my name is Lois. I am an Alberta First Nations person of Treaty 6. Also, I am a post-op transsexual woman of 13 years. In 2009, I was rushed into having SRS before I was ready. So,
Sex
SRS
reassignment surgery.
yes, sex reassignment surgery." In 2009, I was rushed into having SRS before I was ready, resulting in immediate regret and sterilization. So Lois goes on to tell the story. I had started my transition in the fall of 2007 with testosterone blockers, diagnosed with GID. In March 2008, I was sent to an endocrinologist and put on estrogen. Every 4 to 6 months, I was to see a psychiatrist, Dr. Wernick, out of the Grey Nuns Hospital, inpatient psychiatric unit in Edmonton, Alberta. That is a few hours' drive from my reservation. The appointments lasted 30 minutes to an hour. Not once did we talk about my Native heritage and and the cultural impact transition would have. In the early spring of 2009, during one of my appointments, the doctor informed me that the funding was going to be cut to the program that paid for SRS, and he was going to push me through as a candidate for funding. April 2009, I was denied funding due to not meeting the criteria. I was crushed, but also relieved at the same time. I was going at a quote-unquote lowest pace, and that someday I would get the surgery. The rush was due to funding cuts, and I was not eligible due to the fact that I wasn't at the 2-year mark. The doctor said he would advocate for my behalf to receive the surgery. I thought the surgery would still be 2 to 4 years away, as it initially said at the beginning of my transition. No rush. Then June 2009 came along. I got the letter saying I was approved for funding for SRS in Montreal. The surgery was scheduled for September 2009. Because of the funding cuts in the direction of the doctor, it was now or never. I did feel extremely pressured to undergo the SRS. How was I supposed to afford SRS someday? I wish I stayed in that someday mindset. Then September 2009 came. I was having extreme anxiety, and I did tell the doctor, and his response was that it was normal. I knew deep down I didn't want it. Even the day I was being held in a headlock to receive the epidural at the private clinic. I remember waking up the next day in a panic. What have I done? I wanted out of Montreal, and I wanted my parts back. I knew I wasn't ready, but I did it. How do I explain that regret? Even to this day, I can't. Even with the coping mechanisms I have learned, I still can't. I told my then partner that I made a mistake. I didn't do it for me. I remember getting up to walk in the clinic and pacing around the nurse's station. What have I done? I didn't do it for me, I was constantly saying to myself over and over and over again. The mistake was a daily reminder when I had to dilate. I became so withdrawn at this time, and I wasn't until December 2009 when I told somebody other than my partner that I regretted my surgery. I couldn't hold it in anymore, and I needed somebody else to hear it. I told my then mother-in-law. The weight of this regret couldn't be held no longer. I felt disgusted with myself, but it was worse than the original regret. I can't have my own biological child, as if it were ever an option, but my biological reality was gone. After a few months recouping in Nova Scotia, I went back to Alberta to meet with the doctor as a follow-up as per required. I instantly told him everything and more. He didn't know how to receive the panicked regret I was giving. In all of his years of treating people with GID, he never once encountered someone who regretted transitioning fully. He's seen individuals from Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, Yukon, Northwest Territories. I even expressed a possible detransition. He was no help, nor did I want to be a case study. I was told to give it time, that after I'm fully healed, I would be in a better place mentally. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, then 5 years came and went. I requested a follow-up with him again. Nothing changed. He suggested I distracted myself, and so I did. I became an advocate for transgender healthcare in Alberta, quote, different, or brackets, different story for another time. Even with these distractions from self, I felt sadness. Then I found spirituality within my culture. Being First Nations, I grew up learning from my kokum and mosum. I remembered the peace it brought from picking sweetgrass to cleaning deer. I could channel the sadness, despair, regret, and give it back to the Creator. Oh, how I prayed for forgiveness. The more I did cultural stuff, the more I realized I am the last of me. Sure, I have nieces and nephews, but at the time, they didn't wish to learn those things. But I was missing, a version of me was missing. I tried hard to keep this darkness at bay, but I felt like I did something culturally wrong, that I added to a genocide. I reflect back on those visits with my doctor, and not once did he ask me about my culture or what it was like living on a reserve, the cultural significance of being First Nations in Canada. I became a statistic of systematic ignorance. It took me almost a decade to find peace. I learned to acknowledge that regret. I still mourn parts of me the future's never thought of. If I were to have waited, gone at my peace, gotten the surgery after 25, I would have been in a better place. But I am here now with a voice. The trans right activists, its allies, nurses, doctors need to take into consideration the long-term consequences of the cultural genocide of Indigenous people and its many phases, including transition. That statement alone should frighten the most woke. So there's more of a discussion, but that's the gist of it. So that was a story that was written in late 2022, and then about, let's see the date here, early January, Lois that posted again on Twitter and said, I talked to my doctor and I qualify. She is referring me to the MAID team. We talked about my concerns as someone with vaginoplasty and long-term maintenance. I do not want to get old in this body. So Lois has posted, videos, and this person is young, like I would say probably 30s or 40s. And because of this rushed procedure, and now because MAID is open to people with mental illness or will be, now they're turning to that as a solution to this detrimental, regret that they have. And it's just a very sad, I think, commentary of what's happening in Canada right now. And even though it's not covered in the news or it's not covered by the media in any way, I don't know this person. People use social media as an outlet to tell their stories, and I think it's important for us to listen.
Yeah, it's sad on so many different fronts, all kind of tied up together. Number one, what Lois keeps coming back to is the Indigenous heritage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the culture within that particular First Nation, which was completely ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of completely goes against kind of the spirit of reconciliation on
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of fronts. The second thing is the fact that this surgery, this sexual reassignment surgery, whatever you want to call it, was rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And this is over 10 years ago that this was rushed. So you can only imagine what it's like today, especially for minors. And it sounds like Lois is in their early 30s or something like that. because Lois said, I should have waited till after I was 25.
Mhm.
Lois got the surgery in 2009, so that suggests that somewhere in your early 30s.
Mhm.
Um, so a very young person here. And then the third thing that's really sad about it is the fact that they're seeking and sounds like they're going to get approved for assisted suicide.
Mhm.
So uh, it kind of the hypocrisy, I suppose, of the prevailing culture, if you can call it a culture in our country, at least politically, is it completely goes against it. You have a indigenous person who has gender issues, whether they want to identify as transsexual or not. I don't know exactly how Lois identifies, and wants to basically end their lives over a rushed surgery, and it completely flies in the face of everything that's shoved down our throats on the greater culture across Canada. I actually reached out to a couple of people politically on different teams, like Pierre's team, for example, said, I know you guys are pushing really hard against assisted suicide and the expansion of assisted suicide, especially for those that have mental health issues. And I said,
Mhm.
you should reach out to this person because this is exactly what needs to be talked about.
Mhm.
And this is a great example of the slippery slope being way too slippery and how quickly it can go down.
Mhm.
We can go down that slope. So it's sad on a whole range of different perspectives.
Yeah, and it's just such a like I feel so bad for people because they're being lied to from start to finish, and the finish is the final lie that ending their lives is the only solution. And they often are not confronted with any other alternative, and it makes me really sad when Lois talks about talking to the doctor, and the
Hmm.
doctor just acting so casual. Oh, you'll be fine. Oh, give it some time. Like, this isn't getting your tooth pulled. Like, this is a serious situation. So if somebody is suffering or having a mental health issue with it, that's not how you respond whatsoever, right? So much so that it impacted this person so long that this is what they're turning to, and it's like government condoned. You know, it's government it's treating something that the government pushes on you at a young age, and then the government then pushes and then pays for you to end your life because of what they pushed on you. And this is why I think
It's
we're
so cruel.
so
It's just
yeah,
cruel.
this is why I think it's so important for us to get involved in school issues at the school board level, because it is important to have differing opinions and alternative voice to this sort of pervasive commentary that's making its way into the school system about gender. And people often talk about how conservatives are so obsessed with other people's sexuality, and it's like, well, not only are we getting confronted with it by teachers and principals in the school system in general, but also I, just as a compassionate person, feel great empathy for Lois. And if there was some way that we could convince this person not to take that route, and I think that a lot of people on Twitter are feeling the same way, because
Mhm.
Lois then put out a video, I think yesterday or the day before, talking about how they're fine, and maybe they'll go into their decision to have made a little bit later. But you know, obviously there was an outcry, like, don't do this. This isn't, it's not worth it. Your life
There,
has value.
there's an outcry from a certain group of people,
Hmm.
but there isn't an outcry from another group of people.
Hmm.
And that is what's truly telling. Like, who actually cares about the human person as an individual? Like Lois said, Lois feels that they are like another statistic, right?
Hmm.
And I think what Lois is getting at is the the doctors and the healthcare professionals, if you can call them that, are dumping Lois into this group of people, right? Now this is your identity. Now you're part of this group. Well, no, Lois is an actual person, an actual individual, completely and utterly unique from every individual that has ever come before us and any other individual that's to come after us, of all the billions of people that have ever existed or will exist. And so every person's issues, while they could be very similar, is unique and different, and the healthcare system doesn't seem to give a shit at all. Like Lois is asking about detransitioning. Now,
Hmm.
I'm no professional in this. It would seem to me that detransitioning for those that go from female to male is going to be probably a little bit easier than male to female, right? Because there are
Hmm.
certain surgeries like vaginoplasty that just I don't think can be reversed, can be detransitioned. But of course, these voices will never be heard. And those on the political left, the cultural Marxists, if you can call them that, will completely and utterly ignore these voices, these people who are suffering, which are probably, as time goes on, going to become legion. I mean, the crazy thing to me is when you think about this, the surgery was rushed in the autumn of 2009. We are now in the winter of 2023. So I think of like, oh, 2009, like I was 19 years old, like I was barely in university. That's almost 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aging myself there a little bit, but if this was rushed 15 years ago, you could only imagine today, especially like a minor who's seeking extreme, let's call it extreme butchery surgery that's irreversible, how rushed that's going to be now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, really uncomfortable to think about.
And also, what is the MAID procedure now? Like this person was already rushed through,
Mhm.
gender reassignment surgery. Now, maybe they'll have the same, regret about MAID. So, like, are the proper precautions? Is this person talking to a mental health expert? Are they getting to the root of the problem instead of just turning directly to this as a solution to some, past regret and pain. So the whole thing is so completely messed up. And it's like I said, it's a very sad commentary on where Canada specifically is, because these are not solutions to the problem. These aren't helping people. They're not making, Canada a more compassionate and empathetic and equal place, really, to be honest. It's the exact opposite. So I think it's a really important story to highlight. And like I said, even though it's not really like a mainstream story in any
It
way,
should be.
it definitely should be, but it won't. And we know the reasons why. I don't think Rachel Gilmore really will be covering Lois, let's just say.
I feel like I do this on this podcast all the time, but the fact of the matter is that you might not be interested in politics, but politics is going to be interested in you. And so I'm going to bring this to a political level, if that's all right with everybody. Later this winter, potentially in the spring, they're going to have the report come back from, I believe, the Department of Health and the Department of Justice regarding the expansion of the criteria for assisted suicide with the legislation that went through in 2016 and 17, or 2016 and then again in 2021, I believe. Anyway, when they're discussing about expanding all this criteria for assisted suicide, which I believe now, as these stories begin to come out, there's going to be more of an appetite out there amongst the Canadian populace to not only be against the expansion of the criteria of assisted suicide, but even roll back existing criteria as they are today. I think that when the committee meets to discuss this, I would really love to see Lois still be with us. I'd like to see Lois be with us for many, many years, but I'd love to see Lois be with us and go and speak to that committee, not necessarily like to help the Conservatives or to not help the Liberals, but just to help people and help Canadians in general, and to make sure that we have laws that make sense. Because this person personifies a bunch of issues currently in Canadian politics that are very, very wrong. And frankly, again, to get political, a bunch of issues that a lot of Conservatives aren't willing to talk about, and that Liberals are almost always willing to talk about, except when things like this transpire. So
Right.
I hope justice be done at a political level for this person and just for Canadians in general.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Now, this leads into our next topic, and that is of Dr. Peterson, because as most people know, Dr. Peterson, became famous for not using preferred pronouns in his classroom at U of T. And now he's got a show on the Daily Wire. He's a renowned speaker, author, all that jazz. And so he became another media story recently because he was notified by the Ontario College of Psychologists that he submit himself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts. And they say that if he objects or if he doesn't do it, then he will face an in-person tribunal hearing and suspension of his right to practice as a licensed clinical psychologist. So Peterson said that on Twitter that his crime on social media was retweeting Pierre Poilievre and criticizing Trudeau and his political allies, because when they said that there were complaints to the Ontario College of Psychologists, they told him what those complaints were. And one was criticizing Trudeau and Gerald Butts. One was retweeting Pierre. One was criticizing.
Did you go through it, Alyssa?
Yeah, I went through a couple of them.
Yeah, I went through them. They're all very political.
Yeah.
There's one that's kind of sort of maybe borderline, but you really have to stretch at that. It was some person saying like, oh, we should have depopulation. And I think they were targeting like a few different people, basically arguing for eugenics. And Dr. Peterson said, well, why don't you start us off then? Like if this is what you're suggesting, like, again, like it's like borderline.
That's hilarious because my dad would always say, because, people would always be like, because I'm the oldest of 9 kids. And so people would always, comment to my parents like, oh, haven't you ever heard of birth control or whatever? And he'd always say like, too bad your parents didn't. But it's funny because, people always are quick to criticize or say, overpopulation or save the planet and no more kids and stuff. But when the tables are turned to them, they no longer hold those same views.
Yeah, it's like AOC being against natural gas stoves. And then she has in her apartment a natural gas stove. And she says, well, no, I rent, so it's not under my control. Well, if you really believe in it, then don't rent at that place.
Doesn't Billie Eilish always talk about, climate change and all this stuff, and she like makes products that are contributing en masse to the climate, polluting the climate, and she recently said that she knows that, but she's not going to stop making her products anyway. Like, it's just
well, it was interesting.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah, when we get back to Dr. Peterson, it was interesting because I don't know exactly how with that college here in Ontario that works. Like if you have to have been a client of Dr. Peterson's or you're just complaining about none of them are his clients, because they claimed that they were his clients. He's like, none of these are my former clients. Dr. Peterson, once he became famous and started doing tours and a lot of interviews and things like that, he said, you know what, I need to stop my practice now because it'd be unethical and I just can't do it. So he hasn't seen a client for almost 6 years at this point. So, it's just a bunch of bullshit. But the scary thing is that if it does go through, if it can happen to Dr. Peterson, it can happen to anyone, whether you're a psychologist, whether you're a physician, whether you're a lawyer, an engineer, an accountant, teacher. Well, yeah, I mean, we've known that for a while, but I mean, it doesn't matter. But that doesn't mean that you just have to kind of roll over and be like, oh, well, all those credentials I worked for all those years ago are just gone. He's suing them. Which he's even himself said he doesn't have confidence in the judicial system because our judicial appointments for the last number of decades have been to a bunch of woke leftists, including under Stephen Harper, which is why we have assisted suicide, because the Carter decision in 2014, which was 9-0 unanimous, that was a majority Stephen Harper appointed court. So, it's important that we get actual conservatives in there to appoint reasonable people to the benches. But anyway, you can take over these professional bodies and making sure that they make good decisions, reasonable decisions.
Yeah. So Peterson, he wrote an op-ed in the National Post right when this was happening, and he said that anyone anywhere in the world can levy a complaint to these regulatory bodies for any reason, regardless of whether the complainant has had any direct contact with the professional in question. So, it's up to these regulatory bodies to use their discretion on whether these are valid complaints or not. So when somebody's complaining of somebody's personal political views, clearly that's not a a valid complaint, but they're using it to try and strip him of his credentials and his psychology license, even though he's not even practicing. But yeah, like you said, it's important to get involved in these regulatory bodies. And it's interesting because while this is happening simultaneously at the Law Society of Ontario, is also seeking to increase its disciplinary powers over members of the legal profession, which includes members to attend a retraining known as specified continuing education or remedial programs, a new way of calling members onto the carpet. So basically, if a lawyer has done something where the Law Society deems that it's not that bad for disciplinary actions, but they still don't think it's that great, they can then submit you to have these basic, similar to Jordan Peterson, these retraining from, guidance from them, basically. And so we all know what that means, because 4 years ago, the Ontario Law Society passed, or was trying to pass, a statement of principles requiring Ontario lawyers to subscribe to and sign a statement that promotes certain values of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And we all know what those words mean. And
Die.
Die, exactly. Diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so a lot of lawyers refuse to sign. And, famously Lisa Bildy, who used to work for the, remind me of the name,
JCCF?
Yeah, Justice for Constitutional Freedom. Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. There was a whole story, and it's like, to me, one of the most inspiring stories, because she was a lawyer in Ontario. She saw that they were trying to pass this policy. She sat down at her computer at her dining room table by herself, and she just started calling lawyers, getting people involved to run a slate during the meeting to elect the board of directors that was solely against this policy, and every single person that they ended up recruiting to run on this slate got elected, and so this statement of principles didn't pass. So now they're trying to pass something else 4 years later, and they're going to do the same thing, I assume.
Yeah, and it needs to be all professions that need to start doing this. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, well, I'm a chartered professional accountant, or I'm an engineer, like, why would this ever happen in my profession? Well, wake up. The cultural Marxists are coming after you. They want you to not be able to have an income to sustain your family. They want to make you suffer so incredibly badly, financially, or maybe even otherwise, to the point that you basically give up your free will, you give up free thought, and you fall in line with their Marxist ideology. That's why you have to get involved at the level. So, for example, for me, I research all the people who are running for the board of directors for the CPA board in Manitoba. And I do background research on every single one. I spend about an hour or two every year. Again, an hour or two every year doesn't take very long. And I make sure that I cast my vote very, very thoughtfully. There's a lot of people in my profession that don't cast a vote at all for these board of director positions at the AGM. So it's really important that you do get involved. Of course, there's the obvious ones that would be the ones targeted the most being, lawyers and physicians, and now psychologists because of Dr. Peterson, although they're, related to the health profession. But that's not to say that they're not going to go after other professions as well, even if it's not related to the health field. So I think it's really important for people to get involved, or at the very least be vigilant and do your due diligence and making sure that you actually cast a vote, and you're casting a well-researched vote.
And you can fight against it. Like Lisa Bildy is a perfect example. Like, all you need to do is run a slate, is contact other like-minded people in your profession, which there are plenty. They're just waiting for someone to take the lead more often than not. And you can win. And it has happened before, and it will happen again, especially as more people, recognize that they're being attacked for their values and their beliefs, no matter what profession they're in. So it's not a losing battle for sure. But I'm really happy that Jordan Peterson is talking publicly about this, and he's said that anything that comes his way from the society, he'll publicize, and he'll talk all about the lawsuit and everything. So I'm eager to follow this closely and see what happens.
Hey, the best disinfectant is sunlight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com.
And be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
It's almost the end of the podcast, but it's now time for things we like and things we hate.
Okay, it's just one of each, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
we did a special, so basically we decided we're going to do things we like, things we hate over the, holiday. And we wanted to do it entertainment. So things either we watched, we listened to, or we saw.
Okay, can we start with things that we love? You go
Sure.
first.
Okay. So this isn't something that I loved, but I did like it. My mom and I watched the Banshees of Inisherin.
Oh, how was it?
So I liked it for sure, but I also didn't watch the end of it because I was cringing too much because I don't know what it is, but as I grow older and as I have kids, I'm so squeamish. Like anything just grosses me out. I need to watch pure comedy, and anything dramatic or even, I don't want to give anything away, but anything bloody grosses me out. So, it seems weird that I would say this if you watch the trailer, but so again, I don't want to give anything away, but very good acting. I mean, there's no greater duo, I think, present day than Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Have you seen In Bruges?
Of course.
Yeah.
Classic. Christmas classic.
Die Hard and Bruges, yeah.
Yeah.
But they're really great together. And I think, who cares about awards, but I just saw in whatever that Colin Farrell won something or other for his
Golden Globe?
role in that. Yeah, that's what it was. So anyway, I thought it was and it was really funny, really well acted. I love the Irish accents. It's like the supporting actors, like not the main characters, but the kind of little characters on the side were also really well done. And it was a social commentary to a certain extent as well. So it wasn't just a meaningless movie. So I definitely recommend it. But again, I was just kind of like in some of the parts, but.
This is hilarious to hear because you used to watch religiously The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Which is just pure gore.
It's weird though, because when you watch like sci-fi gore or something like a zombie, to me, it's like, okay, whatever. But when it's something that's more realistic, it's way grosser.
Got you. Okay. Mine's kind of serious too, and I took it to heart that we talk about film and TV all the time, but not enough books. So I have a bunch of books that I started quite some time ago, and one of them is called, this is going to show off my Catholic side, so just you're going to have to deal with it. It's called The Glories of St. Joseph, and it's by kind of like an obscure British priest, Father Thompson. It was published in the 1880s, and he goes through all the patristics, so all the early church fathers. A lot of these church fathers either knew the Blessed Mother personally or people that were, very close to her. We're talking about a lot of these church fathers from the the 100s, maybe the 200s. And so it's about the life of St. Joseph. And this is all, kind of oral tradition or things that are written here and there. I mean, people have to understand, of course, up until the legalization of Catholicism, it was very difficult to write these things down because Catholics are being hunted down in the Roman Empire constantly. But one of the cool stories from it that I found really cool, and hopefully this will be a bit of an aha moment for you, Alyssa, but our Blessed Mother, she was entered the temple at 3 years old because she was the only child of Saints Anne and Joachim. So they gave her to the temple at 3 years old, and she lived in the temple for 12 years. So she had a very, very very top level education, right? Because in the Jewish world, you're not going to get a better education than at the temple. And Saint Joseph at the time was also working at the temple as a carpenter because he just loved the temple liturgy. And at that time, they were expanding the temple, or at least the furnishings in the temple. So he apparently, according to tradition, he built a lot of them. Anyway, so because she didn't have parents, it was the priests in the temple that had to find her a spouse. And so when she turned 15, they had all these men come in, and they said, well, she's from the house of David through her mother, so we'll bring in all the men who are single and of age from the house of David that live in Bethlehem, which was Saint Joseph was included in that. And so they said, because everyone had a staff back then, like a walking staff, they said, write down the name on your staff, throw it into the middle of the floor, and we'll do the same thing that Moses did for choosing Aaron to be the next priest, or the priest. And that was whatever staff flowers the next day, that will be the spouse for Mary. And so when they came back, there was only one staff that had flowered, and that was St. Joseph's, and it flowered of lilies because she is the lily of the valley. And so in a lot of Catholic art, as well as like with the Orthodox in iconography that goes back thousands of years, and I think this is the aha moment for you, Alyssa, when you see different Catholic statues, you'll see St. Joseph with his staff holding the child Jesus, and his staff has lilies on it, and that's why.
Ah.
And I never had realized that until I read this. So anyways, there's a bunch of cool little things like that in here, and I'm really, really enjoying it.
But are there banshees in it?
I've not done it yet, so maybe. I don't know.
It also sounds like, I feel like, a lot of current TV producers should read this book, because I think this would be a cool like dating game show, like revision.
Throw in your staff.
2023. Yeah.
Mine wouldn't flower.
It's
Mine
like
would
Love
just
is
rot.
Blind, and it's all these like love at first sight and all this stuff. Well, just this is a good way, and it's worked, obviously. So
Yeah, exactly.
well, that's a good one. I learned something new, and I appreciate that.
Okay, now something that you hate.
Okay, so I actually could not think of anything that I hate, so I pulled a Michael Scott, and all I could think of is I hate how much I love karaoke, because
I think other people do too.
well, not me singing karaoke, just karaoke in general, because my mom bought a karaoke machine, and all my brothers and sisters, well, 99% of them were down for Christmas, and we all sang karaoke quite extensively, and it just gets so annoying after a while, and people like dwindle, but I'm always there for it, like front and center, cheering people on.
People are leaving the room.
Yeah, it's just like they're getting bored of it.
The
but
lights are being dimmed.
I'm like, who's next? My ears are ringing. Yeah, but it's fun, and we always used to go in Toronto as well. And
we went in DC, remember?
Yeah, and you know what? One time I went even in Vancouver. My very first flight ever was when I was 22 years old to visit my friend in BC, and I did Celine Dion. I was the last person at karaoke, and out of nowhere, this guy from the crowd jumps up to the stage, puts his arm around me, and starts belting it out with me. And my friend just happened to take a picture, which I still have to this day, and it's both of us just arm in arm belting out Celine with our mouths wide open.
See,
it's the
that's like throwing
picture.
in your staff. Who is throwing in his staff?
Yeah. I hope that man well, wherever he is. But yeah, I can't really think of anything I didn't like over the Christmas holiday, or even something I watched. Like, we just watched all the greatest Christmas movies. I, of course, didn't read anything. You know what? We watched Home Alone and all of them, and I never finished any of them because I couldn't. So one day I'll read a book over Christmas holidays, but not this year. It was not the year.
We for our jobs read a lot.
Yeah.
We do read a lot. So sometimes at night it's like, I remember when I worked landscaping, well, mowing lawns in the summer in universities, when I would get off my shift and get home, I would pick up a book and read at least a chapter or two, because you're not kind of reading during the day, you're working or whatever. Now that for my job I read during the day, like at night it's like the last thing I want to do, and my eyes are so sore. So.
Yeah, I just want to like watch something has no blood in it, that doesn't make me think too hard, and just sleep for an hour before my kid wakes up. So yeah. Okay, what is your thing that you hate?
Okay, so mine's a love hate. It's like a meet
We
cute.
both cheated.
Yeah. Okay. For people who didn't listen to the other podcast, we were stuck in Calgary on our way to Brandon, and we were homeless. And so Alyssa and her husband, even though they weren't there, were so kind to let us use their house what we thought would be for a couple of hours. Ended up being a couple of days. So there we were. We put our baby daughter to bed, and it was just the two of us. And Alyssa's place is so cozy at Christmas time. It's so well decorated. We're like, we have to watch a Christmas movie. But we have this tradition, my wife and I, and we've done this ever since we were dating. We watch at least one Hallmark Christmas movie and just pick it apart viciously. And so we destroyed what little was left of your jar of M&Ms. And we ordered pizza, and we did it. And the movie was called Miss Christmas. It's as cringy as you think. Her last name legitimately was Christmas, and her first name was Holly. The characters, maybe the actresses, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I love the love part is I love doing that with my wife because it's so much fun and we have so many laughs. The hate part is I truly do despise.
Well, was it just like this chick this big city girl went to a small town? Like, was it the typical plot?
Okay, so this is what happens. She works for a company in Chicago, of course. So this is the big city. And her only job for the whole year that she's paid for is to find the perfect Christmas tree for the square in Chicago that doesn't actually exist. She has an assistant who is like the fun redhead or whatever that lives in like a multi-million-dollar condo in downtown Chicago. How she can afford it or what exactly she does, because always like breaks to her like in the movie and she's doing like dick all like, so like I don't know what she does, but she makes a ton of money. I want that job as an assistant to the main character. And then the main character has found the perfect Christmas tree, and it's in this small town, and so she wants to obviously chop it down, bring it back to Chicago, but the guy who owns the tree doesn't want it because his mom, who had died last year, and his dad wrote like "I love you" or whatever on the trunk. He's being a bit of a baby about it, and so she has to work about it. But this is the best part. The actress that plays this character is like okay, so like the actors and actresses that star right in these starring roles in these Hallmark Christmas movies are always like pretty good looking, right? But pretty good looking for like 45. She was like really good looking, and he was like the fuggliest guy they've ever got. So like I couldn't get into it, and he was just like a dick to her, and I was like, you can't afford to be mean to this woman. There was one scene where she's like, she usually dresses like in red and green or whatever because she's Miss Christmas, and then she's staying of course at the house for like a month to try and convince him to chop down the tree that he loves, which I'm like, move on, lady. Like anyway, so I'm getting really into this, but it's very upsetting. So there's this one scene that we just bust her gut because she's like dressed kind of like modestly like they do in Hallmark Christmas movies, and then she's coming down the stairs and she's has these like thigh high like stripper boots and this like super short dress with like this big deep cleavage, pink. It's not even red or anything. It's like, so it's like she really wanted that Christmas tree. It's like, there is a way you could get that Christmas tree with Mr. Fugly over there, but you're not getting there.
Yeah.
Maybe you sent the assistant redhead. Maybe that's why she makes so much money. But anyway,
so a note to all those Hallmark producers: get Scott Hayward a hotter guy. For the
that's
love
right.
of God.
I need a better looking guy.
Jeez.
We gotta throw producer Dave in there or something like that. Anyway, it was very upsetting. I apologize. One of my best friends, his wife loves Hallmark Christmas movies, and she loves them unironically. So if she's listening to this,
You'll
I
have to tell me
apologize.
who it is after.
I will, and maybe next Christmas, her and I can watch Miss Christmas together, and I'll try to keep it together.
Yeah. I did not watch a Hallmark Christmas movie this year.
You're missing out.
Sad.
Some of our former employees star in them,
Yeah.
but they're good looking enough for that. We're not. Although apparently I would be. I was better looking than this guy, like objectively.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
That must have been bad. All right. Well, on that note, we will see you in a couple weeks. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, our Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so that you can get notified when our next podcast is out. We're with you every other week. And thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again.
Bye for now.